Blessed love and peace. These are some notes um, from recent experience, communication, and sharing. The first joint is about sex, and it's something that's very simple, but it's something that's very beneficial to recognize. And it is this: every person with whom we have sex stands between us and our family. Point blank, plain and simple. That's not just a matter of, well, I'll put it like this. What does that mean? Every person that we have sex with decides whether we see our family member next week or ever again. Everyone. It's a barrier. Every person that we have sex with stands between ourselves and our families, our blood. And we have to navigate, negotiate, agree with the people that we have sex with to be in company and fellowship with our family again. That's not just a matter of like voodoo dolls and people being controlled, but people do have a say beyond their own volition. The people's anger, people's pain, people's suffering, people's hurt, people's love and affection, and people's support, and people's respect, whatever our relationship is continually with the people that we have sex with, that determines our interaction with our family for the rest of life. Full stop. No going back, no undoing, no redos, no reboots, no resets. So when the relationship with the people that we have sex with is volatile, that affects our relationship, our ability to even see our family in the future at some point. And when our relationship with the people that we have sex with is very positive and supportive, strong path. So it's beneficial to be mindful, because when kinfolk have sex with lots of people, all those people are in that barrier and have that say. And it's beyond their own want. It's not a matter of, it is a matter in certain ways of saying, nah. But that's not the totality of it. It's a matter of people's genuine pain of how we treat the person, and not even just how we treat that person, but how that person is treated by others. And additionally, and that pain saying, nah, not right now, kinfolk, not right now. Not like this, not for so long. Okay, that's enough. It's the pain that does that. And it's the hurt, and it's the disrespect, and it's the negligence and everything else. And that becomes further evident with time, because when we have a strong relationship with family before having sex with anybody, then there's strong bonds. However, once that sex is done, that barrier grows. So it's heedful, again, for there to be fewer people to have sex with, to have that type of power of barriership, whatever. But then also to have marriage, a commitment, so that even before we have sex with a person, that person meets our family. There's a marriage, there's a wedding, and there's agreement and congruence. So something to keep in mind, particularly in our younger days, our younger years, when in the increasing semblance of invincibility and permanence and everything else like that, to recognize the significance of the decisions that we make, even at that moment at the house party, feeling a little tipsy and buzzing and vibing off a nice conversation or whatever else, and there's a quiet room over there. That changes everything from that point. So that's one consideration. Second consideration, this one is actually a little bit difficult particularly for the brethren, but it's to recognize this, and this is particularly for the brethren, and this is a tough one. Yet it is this, to recognize this, that equation that I just mentioned also applies to the occasions, and that's not just sexual intercourse. It's kissing, it's foreplay, it's whatever, and the intensity of the interaction is equates to the intensity within the barrier. So if it's just like slight stuff, like, then that's the nature of the power in between. If it's like boyfriend and girlfriend, or just like hookup partners for like months and going at it, intense physical intimacy and all different types of stuff, and explorations and everything else like that, that's the intensity of the barrier from that point on too. So again, is the heedfulness there. Now again, to the second joint, for brethren, this is very beneficial to recognize. It's very difficult. It's very difficult, but it's very beneficial. So here it is. That same phenomena applies, that same experience of sexual intimacy applies when brethren who are straight, however, still watching pornography together. That's a sexual experience between the brethren, even though we know brethren aren't trying to be like that or whatever. That's a sexual experience, and that factors into it. That factors into the barrier. And when brethren go to the strip club and watch titties and naked women, that's a shared sexual experience with all the brethren there, the strangers and everybody else. And that adds into the barrier, into the factor, because that's the nature of the race. Again, it's not the same, it's not equated to actual sex and physical intercourse, but it's within that spectrum. And it's beneficial to recognize that, because the ways in which to heal now, and once it's done, it's done. It's done. It's for life. The only thing that can be done from that point is just to heal and make amends as much as possible. That's all that can be done. But once it's done, it's done. So there's no redoing it. There's no pretending. There's no like, okay, let's never talk about this again. That makes little difference. There can be amends. There are amends. There are ways that, all right, that was my bad, or whatever. In all the different situations, whenever there's that sexual intimacy without marriage, without that commitment, there is the appropriateness, the guidance to make amends, apologies, and to mend the ways, to stop doing the harmful behavior. So even just a brethren watching pornography, that's binding, that's bound to all the women or whoever he's watching concerning the pornography, and those people having a say within that brethren's relationship with the rest of his family, with his blood. So again, it's a matter of recognizing that, and again, it's rather difficult to make amends with everyone somebody watches online having sex or having sexual intimacy or being naked or whatever else. Recognize, but that's part of the difficulty of what society is experiencing at this moment, because without that, there's malaise, there's dissonance, there's bad vibes that are unreconciled and go unreconciled, and then become conflagrated, become compounded, increased and complicated. Because one of the things people do is get egos and like pretend that this thing of perfect and that's other people's fault, I didn't do that, and and so without addressing the actual ailment, just covering it up, and that just compounds it. And somebody might have a nice front or whatever, but they are so that's two considerations. Third consideration is the demons and angels. So these are notes on some things that are learned from recent experience, things that are shared from recent experience. and I talk about demons and angels. One thing in our walk, um, there's recognition that demons are angels. Demons are just a type of angels. Everything, demons and angels, are simply manifesting the will of God on earth. So people might look at demons as being evil or otherwise, but because oftentimes when people experience what the actions of what people refer to as demons is because those actions cause some type of um, perceived pain or whatever, or take something away from the people that people have an attachment towards. So then the beings are referred to as demons or whatever else. But ultimately, all the demons are from God and exactly manifest the exact will of God. So it's a matter of recognizing that yes, we still have to wrestle because we are beings of God as well, and we're in this with our sentience. We are guided to wrestle and reconcile with the conditions, the phenomena of samsara, this temporal realm, amidst the energy flow. So, not just giving within our theology or whatever, demons. We can talk about it in like a negative kind of way or whatever, but just recognizing demons are still just simply angels manifesting the will of God. So, that being said, um, spirits possessing people and stuff like that. That sounds like quackery in this modern and postmodern scientific age or whatever. Um, but there are many kinfolk who recognize there's an actuality to that. It's a matter of being further literate and further knowledgeable about the nature of these phenomena. Um, so, I mean, we can look into the Holy Scriptures, Gospels particularly. Um, to a certain extent, the Quran, the Digha Nikaya from Buddhism provides a lot of insight about the nature of celestial beings. I think the Upanishads does too. Very actually, to be honest, because the Upanishads particularly addresses the senses, and just the personification of what the scientific mind looks at as inanimate. And it actually affirms much of the native knowledge, what is referred to as pagan knowledge about the relationship with trees, plants, and energy, the planets, the soleil, the wind, and additionally. So, just put things in context. Just looking at the notes from the world, and then making uh, looking at notes from the world and making and learning uh, and living accordingly. So that's some of the historic. This is not me just making stuff up. I study from many different sources. I practice the guidance in terms of prayer and meditation as best I can, and that provides a lot of insight. It provides a lot of explanation. It provides a lot of contextualization or explanation and translation of today's experience. So all that being said, um, there's many stories I can personally share about my experience with angels and demons and otherwise. Um, but I will respond, or I'll share the example from yesterday that is recorded, because that is an example of it. Now, the thing about like, and again, like there's a lot of like shibboleth about like the whole notion of possession and this and the other, and again, a lot of it is intentionally quackery. Like when we look at popular culture, when we look at like the witch trials and things like that, and so it takes on this kind of very hedonistic, primitive type of non-thinking type of thing, and that lends itself to just lots of criticisms and dismissiveness. So even in using the language, it's like, oh, that's one of them. So, but anyways, less concerned about that. But when I use certain terms, I'm just being mindful of that. So the notion of like somebody being influenced or under the influence or under the control of a demon or spirits or otherwise, um, there's degrees of it. A person can just be out of it and just there, or the person can have like semi-consciousness, and be literally wrestling and just trying to like focus on what one's doing, but at the same time, like being influenced to doing something. And there's a very accurate way of describing this that I want to hold off on a second, though, God willing. Um, but yesterday, the brethren showed an example of it because um, one of the characteristics that we observe when dealing with kinfolk, material beings who demonstrate some type of demon experience, is that the brethren tend to be somewhat tentative, Now, this is not across the board, but this seems to be the further common experience, because there are kinfolk who can just be out and out violent and just da da da. So we have to be careful not saying, oh, it's a demon. Okay, then we can just rely upon these characteristics. This is just one, and it seems to be a very common one, because the tendency it has ability of like staying under the radar and not getting the attention of conventional authorities or otherwise. So, but what we observe is that a brethren or sisterin tends to be aggressive, be provocative. Put it that way. Be provocative in a very like in a testing kind of way, like just poking, and looking to get a reaction. Um, and after poking and then seeing an initial reaction, keeping a distance and not pushing it, and at the same time, the whole time, not having a lot of cognitive functionality, and meaning like intelligence. And that's not a matter of just being stupid or whatever, but just not the functionality of like being able to talk and like have a conversation and like speak with some intelligence and be calm and whatever else. Some functionality, but very scant. And so it's kind of like emotion. It's kind of like a childlike mentality of like doing provocation. Now it's an adult body. Very, very often it can be children, but it's adult body. Poke, and then keep a distance. Not be too physical, because don't know what the reaction is going to be. So poke, and then keep a distance, and then from that distance, if there is a reaction, to just continue to provoke and provoke and provoke, and it's kind of like in a jovial, jesting kind of way, and the intention is to just invoke anger and frustration and hostility on the part of that person. And when that person does respond with anger and hostility, to feed off of that. And that's how the demon oftentimes in this scenario and in this characteristics is empowered, by that other person's impatience, by that other person's frustrations and anger. And then the provocator, the initiator, is able to display the reaction in a very hostile, irrational way. And then it's easier, it takes less intelligence to just make that look silly and stupid and primitive or whatever, and then just continue to fuel that. Keeping a distance, not trying to be physical, whatever, but just feeding off of that angst of the other person. And that going on and on and on. I've had situations where it goes on for like hours, just continual abuse. Even when I respond with a modulated, respectful, continually rational talking, and additionally, it's rather formidable, impressive how long it can go. But it's still a low functioning intelligence, and I don't mean to sound derogatory or whatever, but that's just the genuine, honest observance. It's a low functioning intelligence that has, it's like hyenas, it's literally like hyenas. So, the important things to recognize is that it's the provoking, and in a distance, a jovial kind of ha funny kind of clown kind of thing, like playing in the mud. And then one other thing also is that when there is a rationalization, when there is somebody who responds with words, oftentimes what happens is just a repetition. And to be honest, it's kind of like what women do in terms of taking what has been told and then putting it back to the person. So women do that in a much further skillful, a much further productive and constructive and intentional way, and also perhaps in a less irrational way. And whoa, wait, what? Huh? What I mean by that is that the experience with the demon kinfolk is that, and the brethren is a child of God. He's a child of God. All the kinfolk are children of God. I'm speaking about the beings and the sentience and the influence that is guiding that brethren into that type of behavior. And that sound in the psychological jargon, that can sound like just spiritual mumbo jumbo or whatever, but it's observance. It's scientific observance of a sentience that is influencing another sentience. Plain and simple. Open your eyes. Your third eye particularly. Yes. So, the intelligence, but also, again, feeding and repeating what somebody says. So You're being silly right now. Oh, you're silly. What do you know about silly? You're silly. Look at you. You're silly. Da 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 da. Anything that's said to the person, like again, it's low functioning intelligence. So there's little purpose. There's little like substantive redemptive purpose for the person initiating the hostilities and the provocation. So the person has to feed off of and the person being influenced by the spirits uh, primarily needs to feed off of what is provided to the person. Um, so if it's positive, still use the positive to ba 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 ba. And um, Please, holy being, like we want to quiet. Yo, you don't even know what quiet is. You're loud. You're quiet. Yeah, it doesn't make sense. Um, that was my faux pas there. Um, but that's what I'm talking about in terms of just repeating what's said. Um, and Again, because it requires less intelligence, because there's less intelligence to work from. Now, there's still intelligence there, um, but in terms of like the methodology of confrontation or whatever, there's generally a low level of intelligence that's utilized, and it's just a lot of repetition about what's said, and again, provocation, 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 um, and as I mentioned, it can go on for a long time. Um, it can get very agitated, and otherwise. Um, why I said why do I say it's less rational, or what I say why do I say that the techniques of the demons that we observe are further rational than what women do in terms of repeating. As I said, first of all, again, women do it in a much further skillful, uh, productive, constructive, procreational way. But if you when you look at a relationship with a woman, much like a man, but different, a woman is repeating what she has been taught, and women have extreme, miraculous, amazing capabilities of recollection, memory, and otherwise, from life, from long term. So when a woman is taught, when a woman is educated and disciplined, and additionally she holds that and then she shares that. So that's what we're talking about in terms of repeating. Men have the show and exhibit this phenomena of um, innovation, of making something up that hasn't been taught, hasn't been told otherwise directly to men. Men have less of a capacity for memorization. Generally speaking, that's facts. So again, there's pluses and minuses on the different sides. Um, and So that's what we observe concerning the demons. Now, um, so why is it irrational, or why is what the demons do further rational than what the women do? Because as amazing and miraculous as the women's skills are, women also have the tendency of becoming irrational, becoming very emotional, and it's still with very much reason, but it's beyond a reason what men can often fathom, particularly at that moment. Women always have a reason, but the responsiveness, or the responses, or the actions or the responses of women on in certain occasions can be very irrational in the context of the norm of that moment, um, and oftentimes it's because women are trying to protect something, or do something that the man is rather oblivious to. So concerning the demons in this particular type tend to keep things in a zone, and not get it beyond limits, where women can go way off into the deep end or whatever in a split second in an emotionality. Demons tend to be like further, like, don't want to get beyond this realm, because otherwise that brings attention and causes further discredit towards that demon experience. So, and we have to be careful not to just refer to brethren as demons, because there's a distinction. It's brethren who are influenced by the demons. So, um, that's what we're talking about in terms of the rationality, because the brethren with experience, who are experiencing the demons, tended to in this particular type, tend to operate within a certain framework, and not get too agitated or emotional or otherwise in that zone, because the purpose is to just provoke, and then feed off of that. Um, and as long as, well, there it is. So as long as the person just keeps on responding, because usually when it's done to men, men feel this need of like ego, particularly, I mean, this is the homestead right now, so we're dealing with some like homestead type situations. If it's out in the streets or whatever, um, there's increasing, well, there's susceptibility to ego and everything, and when it's not necessary, like it's like, okay, all right, I'm in a different place or whatever. I don't have an onus of like the safety in this area or whatever. So I'm just gonna, yeah, it's not worth it. Let's go, whatever. It's difficult to like to do that. It's looked at as backing down or whatever, as giving in. And so instead, brethren have this tendency of like just continuing to talk, and then and that just feeds the provocation. So either just goes on and on and on, and the demon wrestling brethren just keep on feeding off of that, and then either one, it keeps on going, or two, the brother who's aggravated takes it to the next level, gets physical, and then the demon has a feast with that. Whether they lose or win that physical bout, the demon feasts off that. Or the brethren just says, okay, fine, and then after giving that big meal, the irritated brother just has to continue off accordingly. So that's basically the scenario. Now, when we talk about like what does it look like, and when I talk about, it's not just a matter of like being all out possessed, quote unquote. It's like degrees of it, like people being semi-conscious. The way of describing it is just like being drunk. One could talk about smoking weed, smoking herb. It's less of that effect because that's a different kind of experience. But so intoxication is a further accurate way of describing what is observed when kinfolk are wrestling with demons. So again, just like with being drunk, kinfolk can be mildly drunk and kinfolk can be incapacitated drunk. So similarly with the wrestling with demons, kinfolk can just be like under the influence and easily agitated or otherwise, or kinfolk can be moderate functioning demon wrestling, and kinfolk can be all the way out. So that is an effective way of describing it, and it's a similar consideration concerning how to deal with that, because as many people might have that experience. In some occasions, you can talk to a person who's drunk, particularly if you have a relationship with that person, and like know what's meaningful and everything. Just like, all right, let's go home. Da, 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 da. And sometimes you can't talk to a drunk. Like there's no reasoning, there's no rationalization. That kinfolk is gone, and they're just in another zone at that point. So that's what it's like when talking with the kinfolk who are wrestling with demons. Kinfolk are gone, and the body's there. The mind is mildly functioning like a child. But the adult mind, and additionally, it's been taken over by the spiritual realm. So that's one thing in that respect. So one of the things that's distracting is exactly right before I begin this joint. One of the brethren that I referenced in the recordings yesterday approaches today. Haven't seen him since that night, basically. No, wait, I did see him once walking by, and just by kind of didn't stop, didn't talk, or maybe said something briefly. I do remember there being some type of exchange of words. But at that moment, there wasn't much of a window for broaching the topic. So the incident of the theft of the luggage and the books was a few months ago. It was in the winter, or thereabouts, the winter months. So it was a number of months ago, maybe 3 or 4 months ago. And so I see him once since then, maybe a month or two ago, and then just seeing him today. after everything that's happened. So he arrives today. Now he goes to the front of the building, and I'm sitting up. I'm looking out the window. I can see him. He's talking to another neighbor who resides in this building, um, and so I'm about to go downstairs and say, "Yo, brother, um, well, let's talk about those books." But I can hear that he's planning to leave. He probably already recognizes like I may be on my way down or whatever. So he's about to leave. So as he's leaving, I see, okay, I'm not gonna make it down before he gets off. So I talk out the window, yo, you ready to return those books, brother? He doesn't even look back. He hears me, but he doesn't look back. He stops and looks at his phone and pretends like he doesn't know where it's going, or actually feigns like he doesn't know where it's going, and kind of like saunters off, whatever. And my neighbor looks up at me. I say peace and blessings to him, and he goes off with somebody who's picking him up. Part of the challenge with this is that is that like the network. Like I say, this is the slums of the suburbs. So there's kinfolks who are strung out. There's kinfolks who are drunk. Kinfolks who are enveloped in sex rings, and like right here, the building that I live in. Basically, this is a building of people who have been um, forsaken. Basically, families have just like sold us out or whatever, and so that's what it is. Our situation now, is that the brother right there? Is that him? Oh, is it? He got a doggy woggy. Um, so basically, that's what this building consists of. I'm in that category of being forsaken. The levels of forsaken, or degrees of forsaken, vary from case to case. But beyond the forsakenness, one of the distinctions of my case is sovereignty, and that in itself can be called crazy and another pretense for further forsaking. But such is the nature of life, and such is the nature of those who make such proclamations in the millennia that precede today. So, point is, in the slums of the suburbs, there's all different types of cats, all strung out on all different types of stuff. A lot of smoking, a lot of pollution, and additionally, that affects the conditions, the living conditions, and then the behavior conditions, because cats talk loud at night. I mean, there's thuggish, ruggish. It's not too much as in terms of like in the hood of the city. However, it's not that distant. And the main thing is that it's a lot of people who are the game is like hustling, and not even for themselves, but like they get hired to sabotage stuff, and it's like subsidized kamikazes, because what their priority is getting drunk, and getting a hit, and that's it. And so and having a place to stay, a safe place to stay. So they get subsidized by other kinfolk who have some kind of agenda and want to use them to get into somebody else's business, uh, like stealing something, or starting harassing somebody or bullying somebody or whatever else. So that's what this scene is. And that's where the passive aggressiveness is, because the kinfolk who are strung out on alcohol and heroin or marijuana or um, whatever it is, to get their fix, they get a little payday, and then they say, oh, all I have to do is harass somebody. All I have to do is like make some noise and chop it up and try to provoke them. And, oh, and I get a bonus if they try to beat me up. Oh, but I better not put hands on them, because then I'm gonna get scrutinized. Oh, and I better not tell them where I get this from. Oh, okay. So, and there we go. There's Jonathan. So, speak of the brethren. Um, his car has been. Oh, he might be parking behind the building now to be less conspicuous. That might be what it is. So, anyways, that's the game. Um, and so when and it's not, Little Italy is not even the ones who are masterminding this. Little Italy is under the thumb of the LGBTQ, in conjunction with like the standard European, Eurocentric, American kind of plutocracy, Western Reserve particularly, at all. So Little Italy isn't even like the top dog in this joint. As gangster, and whatever else is Little Italy used to be, um, historically, and that's not meant with disrespect, but just recognizing, as was communicated before, Like Little Italy is on the way out. It's in the midst of gentrification. Um, it's just a question of how fast. Um, and in the meanwhile, like taking shots on the way out, and finding opportunity just to get some kind of ego thing or whatever else. But basically, just still doing the errands and tasks and orders of others. And what we do here is obviously ruffling feathers. It's unseating the power constructs, and it's actually what we're doing here. What we're doing is not even doing that. It's doing it on itself. We're speaking to that, and so it might be an organized way, and perhaps a further perspective replacement, and that might be the fear. But what we're doing is comparatively nothing. We're just talking about it. It's doing it on its own. So and kinfolk know that. That's the thing. Kinfolk know that, but still, it's like they have to play this role and play it out or whatever. So whatever. The main and what we can recognize is that it does cause static within people's experience of the consciousness and subconscious and in the dreaming. We have a keen awareness about that, so that people might personalize it towards myself personally or to kinfolk around me, because what they experience in the dreams might be some nasty stuff. I experience nasty stuff in the dreams, and it's surreal, like this world but another world type nasty stuff. And it's directly related to what is experienced in this wakeful state, this awakened state. So we're not trying to do that to kinfolk. We're not trying to terrorize kinfolk. We're not trying to hit what's it? Not Eddie Murphy, Freddy Krueger. We're not trying to Freddy Krueger kinfolk in the dreams and everything else. We cultivate peace. We strive for peace thoroughly, genuinely, comprehensively. That's what we continue to do. But what we recognize is that when we do that and people are violating and disrespecting us, violating us, abusing us, and otherwise, just the consequences, the cosmic consequences of those abuses is a karmic terror. And it's not our volition. We're not wanting that. We're not wishing that. We're not praying for that. That's the nature of its own. It does it of itself, and it's only up to brethren to stop it themselves. And we just continue to talk. And so brethren might say, well, if we get them to shut up, or if we show them their own corruption, and if we attempt get them into temptation and everything else like that. When I left the joint yesterday, no, 2 days ago, uh, Little Italy, Little Columbus. This is another information new to the scene or whatever. Two very attractive young women who are walking across the street at that time. Now I'm thinking about leaving and preparing to leave or whatever, but the two young women walked by, and then that might have provided further suggestion for me to leave. Now I don't pay too much attention to that at that moment. There's already the consideration. Okay, we put in some time. We're not here with an ultimatum or otherwise. We're here for the opportunity just to show that there's not fear. We're not hiding. If you want to talk, we can talk. We're here to like do anything, prove anything, or whatever else. But we are. This is the walkway. We had the conversation before. You've continued to disrespect that. We're letting you know that it's not, that it's seen. Plain and simple. There's nothing else to say because we've already said it, but you keep on doing it, so we're just putting you on notice that we see you keep doing it. That's it. We don't have to put another sign on the window. It's already said, and we already see that it's seen, so we don't have to do it again. It's already registered. So like I said before, the cigar shop is done. We have no business with the cigar shop at this point. We have nothing to prove. Regardless of what the cigar shop does. Now, again, we're dealing with the parents now. So the cigar shop and all the brethren, all the gangster brethren in that respect, are the children. Now we have to talk with the parents, and we've already talked with the parents. The parents, and these are derelict parents. These are absentee, non-supporting, negligent parents, and it's the Catholic Church, the Rosary Church, right there in Little Columbus. So we've already gone there once, or we've already gone there before. It's further than once, but now we have to go there at this point as a like the last sharing or communication. So. And basically, the consideration was posting a sign there, but that's too little bit indirect and ambiguous. So the working consideration at this point is simply sharing this question to the Catholic diocese, to the Catholic Church, and to the Rosary Church, which is this: to the concerning and to the Rosary Church. When this building leaves the hands of the Catholic Church, into whose hands do you want the building to go? Plain simple question. That's it. So it's already been, I just said it, so it's done. So I don't even need to go to the Rosary Church at this point. There's still the intention for me to do so at some point when there's the necessity or the prudence for me to walk for that Wi-Fi connection or whatever. But at this point, it's been said, it's registered, it's in the ether. So you don't have to talk to the clergy because there's little expectation of the clergy talking with me anyways, because kinfolk hide. So that's the modus operandi. That's not hate, that's not shade. Peace and blessings to the whole Catholic Church. But we know, and you know. So, all right. And it's the feigned, people aren't worth it. We can't respond to all the little people and whatever else and da 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 da. That's fine. Beautiful. Can folks say the same thing about Jesus? So, so anyways, that's what we're dealing with right now, because the brethren is right there still, I think, just lounging in the next door building. Haven't seen him again for months, and now, oh, here he is. And the other thing also is recognizing that one thing we observe is that kinfolk who feign to have a residence at a particular building, at a particular unit, what we observe, what is most likely the scenario, is that like they're part of like a syndicate or whatever, and again, there's bosses that have the syndicate that have probably units in other places. They probably have the buildings in other places and allow people to stay here, and then this dude is causing trouble over here. We want you to like interfere a little bit here, okay? And then if it gets a little bit too hot, all right, now stay over at this place. I mean, it's a different type of, I won't say trafficking, but I mean, it's just another different type of game or whatever else. And so that's people lend themselves further to those type of arrangements because they don't have dependents, they don't have children that they provide for. By and large, they want their fix. They just want to be drunk. They just want to like be comfortable, whatever. And so, okay, nobody gets hurt. I don't have to fight nobody, and da 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 da. I don't have to go to jail. I don't have to go to the psych ward. Okay, that's no problem. There it is. So, continuing back with the joint about sex, the influence. Oh yeah, I better check the storage on this joint. All right, we're at 13. Trece. So again, talking about the nature of the characteristics of the kinfolk who are possessed by demons, it's like being drunk. And it's like seeing a person, they're functioning. They might remember their name. They might have a semblance of cognition about remembering somebody and otherwise. So the low intelligence functionality. But then there's eventually like this provocation. Like there's a snap. And then, there can be actually, to be honest, there's three kind of levels to it. Initially, and this is a different scenario. This scenario I'm about to describe is when we know kinfolk. Like we know kinfolk for years, and these kinfolk are congenial. They're not immediately aggressive or hostile or provocative, and so this is a different type of demon kind of scenario. We're dealing with sleep in the eye again. So in this scenario, like we may know kinfolk by happenstance, through the village or whatever, but it might be for a while, and we have a conversation and we're having a general conversation. And it might be congenial for a certain period. Sometimes, to be honest, kinfolk might not be that talkative, might not have that conversation, and so it's me doing a lot of talking and sharing, and the kinfolk kind of just appreciating it because I try to share a positive word in addition. So kinfolk, I'm not talking down to them. I'm not being disrespectful. I'm talking positive. It's something interesting. Might be about nature, might be about spirituality or otherwise. But okay, dealing with that. Then at some point, to be honest, some kinfolk just continue on. That's it, and are not hostile or whatever. And so there's all the different types. But the one type that does become further agitated is that at some point it might just hit a topic. It might just be something else, and then the person shuts down, and then it becomes like further provocative. And just at first it's a little bit contentious, and then it becomes further and further, and then. In trying to like find wait, what just happened? What's going on? Oh, what's going on? You talking about da, da, da. And then it gets into that scenario again. So that's some of what we observe. Now, what I observe within myself at the moment is hesitating and talking about the LGBTQ experience. So I'm gonna talk about this now. What we observe in the LGBTQ is along these lines, because we've had a number of conversations with dear kinfolk who are in the LGBTQ scene, who exhibit these demon type of possessed type stuff. And I know people talk about that before, about LGBTQ being possessed or whatever, and having the devil, and then that being dismissed as just like non-intelligent kind of condemnation or whatever. So we're not trying to do that trope here, but I'm talking about similar to being drunk, that type of situation where there's another sentience. Like I was just having a very intelligent conversation with somebody, and all of a sudden the person just snapped, and just got into hostile mode. And it's like, whoa, wait a minute, what? Or spiritual conversation. And so, all right, before I say this, actually, it's beneficial to recognize there's something to introduce, to segue into this component of the conversation, of the consideration. So I was talking about like in the initial characteristic situation, in the initial situation concerning observing the characteristics, and observing like the low level of intelligence in terms of being able to conversate. And again, it's not meant to be disrespectful, just recognizing like not being able to talk, kinfolk not being able to talk. Like some people not being able to groom and practice self-hygiene. Wiping with fingers, that's inadvisable. People are often unmindful of where to put fingers in it, to put it in the eye. Eye is a very sensitive place. So what I was just doing is not the healthiest of things, just FYI. Even when just touching clothes. When I wear this shirt often on the exterior, whatever. So if I'm sitting on the ground, if I'm sitting out against buildings or whatever, and then I touch my shirt or whatever, so just for mindfulness. Now continuing on. This characteristics in the particular scenario regarding the brethren, particularly yesterday, wrestling with the demons. Low functioning intelligence and often repeating what is said to the person, and provocation. Now, that might lend to the conclusion of or the presumption of demons just looking, or just people who generally have low intelligence or whatever, or who are less thinking, who just hit the gym or whatever and don't think that much, being further susceptible or being further similar. And that's not the case. The demon thing situation is a matter of infusing within people who are involved in things that are in behavior that is unhealthy, that is destructive, slow time or fast time, whether it's sexual indulgence, whether it's food indulgence, whether it's drug indulgence, whether it's racial indulgence in terms of superiority. I mean, there are all different types of ignorances, and that's where the demons arrive, is within those ignorances and the escapism and otherwise. Just because somebody shows a difficulty in conversation doesn't mean that they're possessed by demons. And actually, to be honest, to be honest, the conversation I have with angels, like holy beings, and demons have a holiness in them of themselves, and that's not demon worship, but just recognizing everything is a manifestation of God. So everything has an intrinsic holiness within it. Respect, be humble yourselves. And we've got to be mindful of the children thing, but humble. So, but when talking with angels, like angels who are here to share miracles of healing and well-being, when I talk with those angels, oftentimes it's very similar. at least at the beginning. Somebody doesn't have a lot of verbal uh, skills, or seems to have low intelligence functioning. But then in talking with that person for a while, being respectful, and additionally, this person's a genius. Wow, they just broke it down in 2 words, simple. A child can understand this. We're dealing with something very strong right here. So again, we can't be very careful about our conclusions, and definitely any tendency for condemnation. So um, just observing the conditions, observing the factors. So just somebody who has difficulty talking, or difficulty, or seems to have difficulty talking, or seems to have low intelligence functionality, doesn't mean necessarily that that person is wrestling with demons per se. Can be an angel. God works in mysterious ways, so we have to be humble and respectful and genuine in our trod, regular, thorough. The longer that we do it, the longer that we're known for doing it, the easier it is in certain ways, but the level just keeps on going up. The expectations, and the work just keeps on going up. Um, all right. That being said, one second, checking on the rise. 1 second, checking on the rise. I need to do some push-ups. I need to do some push-ups. Serious. You already know that though. Even if you don't say it. Trying to be nice. Whatever. All right. So, bbdb dot bb dot bdb dot. All right. Yo, I got work to do. Serious. I only got 13 gigs. How about now? I'm using that as an excuse. I gotta wrap this up because it's only 13 left. All right, we're still at 13. That's it still? Okay. All right. Oh no. All right. So the other thing also is this: just because that's this scenario concerning a demon, doesn't mean that a demon, or that I'll put it like this: there are also scenarios where people who have high intelligence and are high functioning are wrestling with demons, are possessed by demons, maybe even to a further degree than what is observed with the brethren there, who can articulate. However, and that type of scenario, to be generally speaking, is when somebody has attained a high level of not high level, has has achieved, or attained a high level of education, has been trained in a lot of concepts, and additionally, and so again, in that repetition situation, has a lot of material to work with concerning repetition, and at least at the beginning stages of like a confrontation or whatever, doesn't have to exclusively rely upon what the person feeds to repeat it back to them, but they have a store within themselves to kind of like, here's this and here's that. Witness the techniques of psychiatrists and psychologists, but particularly psychiatrists, who wrestle with demons, who wrestle with people who are wrestling with demons on a regular basis. Because when I've been to the psych wards, I've seen that. And there's some tenacious things going on in the psych ward on the part of the people who are being detained there, and particularly on the part of the people who are being detained, or people who are doing the detaining. Everyone in that situation is wrestling with demons. Serious, no cap. Everyone is wrestling with demons in that situation. The security, the nurses, everybody who's being detained. Myself, I wrestle with demons and angels on a regular basis. All right. Psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers, police, everyone is wrestling with demons and angels in that scene. In life, but particularly in that scene. And so people with high intelligence still are wrestling with demons. How does that happen? Where do the demons come from? Again, it comes from the behavior of the person, what the person is doing. Again, if you just look at those things, peace, sharing, chastity, honesty, and sobriety. If a person is being violent, whether it's acute violence of just beating people up, killing people, or otherwise, they're dealing with demons, serious. If a person is being mildly violent, just mild oppression, indirect oppression, they're just still dealing with demons, different levels. But that's the way the demons arrive, is through violence. Peace sharing. So a person is stealing, a person is conning people, cheating people, demons arrive. That person has to wrestle with the demons. Peace sharing, chastity. Person's having sex, not taking care of a man, not taking care of the women, and additionally, all types of demons in that situation. Peace sharing, chastity, honesty. Somebody's lying. Yo, what a entangled web we weave when first we practice to deceive. Cat getting caught up in their lies, not knowing who to trust, and additionally, demons. And then sobriety. Again, I think that's the easiest one to see. Cat starts looking for escape and refuge and relief and peacefulness within alcohol, within herb, abusing the medicinal quality of herb, tobacco, and otherwise, demons. There's levels of it. There's the severities. Some people's addiction, and you call it addiction or whatever. That's the new word. But they're being influenced by another sentience. There's another sentience. There's earthly sentience, the companies that are supplying these things or whatever. But there's also a heavenly, otherworldly sentience. And people open up the doors for that oppression, for that enslavement through the behavior. So that's how it happens. And that's anybody at any level. And people have different ways of wrestling with that. And people have different levels of experience of being overpowered by that. And what we observe is increasingly, an increasing number of people are being overpowered by the demons. And that being normal, that being the normal experience, but in different ways. So that's what we're observing. That's what we're dealing with, and that's what we're articulating. That's what we're sharing, and again, comparing notes, reasoning for brethren and sisters who have the inclination of similarly trotting and doing our best to optimize the health and well-being and healing in this earth, in this temporal realm of universe and samsara. So those are again just the behavior that opens the door for the chains. And then it's to each person to deal with like how to like minimize the experience of those changes. Sometimes the changes can just come off depending upon what the behavior is, making amends, making atonement, apologizing to people who've been harmed, restoring whatever was taken or destroyed or damaged or whatever to the people before it, providing an additional amount as compensation, and additionally, those are methodologies for stiff-arming the demons. It's old school knowledge. It's an old school formula. It's plain and simple. The challenge, though, is that when we become further sophisticated as a society, when we get further educated and everything else with our high levels of literacy, being able to read and everything, we also have bigger egos, and it's further difficult to let go of things, to admit when we're wrong, to deal with living with less, to deal with being perceived as less, have lesser status and standing and otherwise. So instead, people double down on the deception and the fraud and everything else like that. People might try to buy off things and like, instead of saying, oh, my bad for raping you 2 years ago, that was wrong of me, I shouldn't have done it. Instead, it might be here, and here's like some livelihood so that you can like, you and your children can have a safe place to live and recuperate and go through some counseling and healing. And you don't have to worry about working for this point. You can be attentive to your children and deal with what your children are dealing with at school right now, and look at some type of vocation going on in the years and to come, and here's preparation for your children. Rather than doing that, which is the proper thing to do, it's a matter of saying, nah, who, what's her name? No, I don't know. And instead, when trying to deal with the demons and everything, then spending like 10 times that amount, the money amount, for a scholarship to somebody else, some other woman. That's often how it is done. So rather than doing it to the person that was harmed, it's a matter of doing it to somebody who's just like her, but I didn't do it to her. So here it is. And now aren't I a nice guy? Oh, look at this. I have newspaper articles and everything else like that. That don't do it. That don't cover it. Um, at all, to no semblance. And sometimes kinfolk might say, "Oh, okay, all right, fine. I'll give her a scholarship. How about that? We just won't talk about what happened before, but she can have this scholarship 10 times the amount. She could be set for life. We just won't talk about what happened. That don't do it. That don't cover it. We gotta come clean. That's the only way. Or you can deal with the demons and continue with that. That's I mean, and I'm not. I don't make the rules. I don't make the rules. I'm just explaining. I'm not trying to sell it. I'm not trying to convert people. I'm not trying to start some thing or whatever. This is for people who are interested in truth, and we can compare notes. I study long time. I live and I practice long time by the grace of the Most High. So, all right. Going back to the intelligence situation with the brethren. So, brethren of high intelligence, and again, the psychologists and psychiatrists um, are themselves individually wrestling with demons. What kind of behavior are the psychiatrists and psychologists doing? All types. All types. The further people rise through the ranks of the empire, of the pirate ship, the further grime people do onto others. And in that grime, there are demons. Plain and simple. So kinfolk might have a nice veneer and look very put together and additionally, but we already know. I said one of the leading killers, one of the leading causes of death in the United States is car accidents. Those are demons. Those are people who are distracted. Those are people whose minds are being influenced and turned in other directions, causing death and destruction. Those are demons. That distraction, that lack of concentration, that ego of saying, "Oh, I can text and still pay attention." It's that ego. That significant channel for the demon controls and chains. So that's an example. Another example is that suicide is another leading cause of death. Suicide, people killing themselves. I've said this all many times. Suicide is leading cause of death in the United States. People killing themselves. And it's called crazy. It's called sad. I mean, we can call the demons, and that's just another word. Understand it as affliction, severe affliction. So, and that's across the board. It's not the poor people, particularly and predominantly. It's people who are dealing with things in suburbia and in rich houses, and additionally, in addition to the hood and the suburbs and otherwise. So, psychiatrists and psychologists are dealing with that personally. Doctors have one of the leading rates of suicide in the U.S. population, to my knowledge. It's been confirmed by other medical students. So doctors are not immune from this. And doctors are not to be blamed for this either. So, but the point is here is just recognizing that people with high intelligence are wrestling with demons. And there are people with high intelligence who are overpowered by demons and are high functioning because they have a lot of material to work from in terms of repeating and not having to raise the cognitive levels to match whoever it is that is being confronted or otherwise. Now, one of the best ways of well, anything else on that topic of the intelligence, okay. But to recognize that, so just because somebody's intelligent, just because somebody has expensive suits or clothing or car or house or whatever else, that person also has the susceptibility of being overpowered by demons. And again, that's not an excuse just to lambast or even talk like I was talking yesterday. That's not an excuse just to say, "Oh, overpowered by demons. Here we go. Let them have it." No, that was a situation. This is my homestead. This is where I live. This is where I sleep and pray. So when kinfolk are being hostile in terms of urinating on our schoolhouse, and additionally, that's when we get into that defensive mode and getting loud and further. When I'm out well, I'm not territorial. I'm not territorial here. This is not territorial. This is well-being. So if cats want us to move or whatever, we've already left before. We've been brought back here. So It's not a matter of territoriality. I don't own this. I don't own this building. I don't own the sukkah tent, sukkah schoolhouse. I don't own the clothing on my body. I own nothing. But there is a propriety because I'm using it right now. You can't have this shirt. No, talk to Jesus. I don't mean that flippantly, but serious. No. You need this serious? Okay, I have another layer. That's okay. Did Jesus just intervene there? But otherwise, it's not a matter of territoriality at that point. When we're talking about the materiality, it's a matter of well-being and propriety. So, recognizing people with high intelligence and high functioning also have the susceptibility of being overpowered by demons. And again, that does not mean to demonize such kinfolk, to vilify them or condemn them and just say, you're a child of the devil. You can take what Jesus says otherwise, but Jesus also says children of God. So we have to answer for what we do. And I have to answer for yesterday. I didn't call the brethren children of God, so I have to answer for that. All right, so that's one thing about high intelligence, and to recognize that. And again, it's still the same kind of scenario in terms of just repeating and not having a high cognitive functionality, but it seems like that because they're just repeating a lot of things that they've studied. And how can they study and get all that material and be overpowered by demons? It's a gradual process because particularly academia tends to be a gradual process of corruption. Okay, get into this part of it now. So there are a number of different scenarios of how the demon realm self-perpetuates itself in this earthly realm. It's not just by like immediate behavior or whatever, but it's also there's grooming and there's cultivation. So there's like in a quasi sense when people have like some quasi functionality of earthly sentience as a spiritual being, but then are also wrestling with demons. Some people get like a nice groove of like how to a middle line of how to continue doing the corruption and the indulgences and the temptations, and then but at the same time have functionality within the earthly realm and have a certain self-awareness and be able to continue to highly function and particularly highly compete, and if need be conquer others in that process, and then have a methodology and share that from generation to generation. Whether we're talking about cults, whether we're talking about religiosities, or whether we're talking about pedophile rings and otherwise. So, point for this is to speak about how such kinfolk systematically or they have a methodology for grooming and cultivating other participants to be similarly semi-functional in wrestling with demons. And that involves corrupting people, but recruiting select people who have certain traits. It might be a child who just has the strength of innocence and has the angels that go with that child, and then corrupting that child either severely or gradually. And in that corruption, infusing that child with demons to wrestle with, without and a comparatively narrow methodology for wrestling with those demons that has the children continually relying upon the preceding generation accordingly. So again, we can look at religions having that tendency, particularly within the earthly biases of religions. We can see pedophilia rings doing this in a very tenuous way. That's as much as we evidence and have received testimony. We can observe this within the LGBTQ at this very moment. How children are being grooming in schools, particularly public schools and otherwise. So I don't know if that's audible in the moment, but now we have somebody raising their voice, so that's nothing new on that side. That's an example of what we're talking about, though, because they're all different types of cats. But here comes Bookshop Brethren jogging over to the scene for some reason, responding to the man raising his voice. So activity. Now I don't know who that brethren is and who's raising his voice. and that happens very frequently. I mean, the police and ambulances are frequent at that building, so it's a hot spot, and there's all different types of stuff happening there regularly. So that's nothing to be new, and that's why it's easier to hide saboteurs or whatever else in those environments, because it's like everybody's doing things. So, all right, high functioning. Oh, we're talking about grooming. Grooming, that's children. And again, the methodology for doing it in a pedophilia ring is different than the methodology for doing it in a religion, and is different than doing it in like a nationalistic or tribal sense. So, but the basics are similar, and I don't want to equate a religious community to like a cult or a pedophilia ring, but there is, particularly when we look at how the religious communities treat people outside of that religious community, that's where we see the corruption, and that's where we see the harmfulness within the grooming, because the religious communities teach children, particularly the Orthodox community, teach children a very beneficial discipline of behavior within the community itself, but at the same time teaches a very hostile hatred and intolerance towards people outside of the community, and that's where the venting of the venom and the pollution is directed, and that's where the demons arrive, because that's corruption, and it's ultimately antithetical and a violation of the intrinsic teachings of the religious community. And so that's how the demons have some hold within a religious community, particularly the Orthodox practitioners within a religious community. So it's not equating with a pedophile situation, which is just rote corruption and woefulness. So it's different, but it's similar in terms of the grooming. And additionally, the thing with the pedophile ring is that it feeds off of its own. And that's a big distinction between that and religious communities, because religious communities also can be pedophile rings and host pedophile rings, as long as the children are from the outside. I've yet to be told differently from the rabbis in the years that I've been saying this, and I've been seeing this, and it's painful, and I don't like that. It's very difficult, because it qualifies who we can trust categorically on the issue generally. So I don't say that lightly. There's no evidence. It's difficult to find any evidence within the Torah in an earthly sense. The evidence is that we know we have to be honest, and additionally, but in the temporal, and when we get into the further temporal realm of the 613 mitzvot and the details of this and the halakha, and additionally, we abstain from seeing. I'll put this: we see the permission to enslave people, and we see the permission to have sex with people. We don't see a restriction about the age with whom to have sex with, in what the Torah explicitly states, and so by those mathematics, can enslave people, can have sex with people, and no age limit to that. Boom, pedophilia. As long as, because you can't enslave a fellow Hebrew, can't enslave somebody who's in the tribe of Israel, so can't commit pedophilia to a Jewish person, but can enslave and have sex with and have sex with the children of somebody outside of the children of Israel, according to what is explicitly articulated with the Torah. Now, obviously, there's so much further in the Torah than just the Torah. There's the Tanakh, there's the Talmud, and additionally, and we're not trying to go out and like make accusations or whatever. We're genuinely striving. And when we're genuinely striving and relying upon others who proclaim some platform of righteousness, and then when we find this question, whatever, I'm like, we have to be very mindful of our vulnerabilities and how we rely upon other kinfolk. So it's not a categorical condemnation. It's just our own caution. So, anyways, that's what I'm speaking about in terms of that respect. So, in that way, to teach children within Judaism, amongst the children of Israel, to abide by that law and those protocols, there's a corruption, because with the presumption of this being accurate, there's corruption within that, and we know that. Torah teaches that. Emet, the perfect balance, teaches us that. We know that the higher teaching is not enslaving anybody, and otherwise. So that Torah definitely teaches that. In the meanwhile, when people are still working in the laws of the earthly, and according to Torah, there are those allowances, and that's corruption, and that allows for the chains of the demons arriving. And so when teaching children this, and preparing children rightfully to be part of the community and become adults, and additionally, that's corrupting, and that's grooming children to have a hardness, to have um, a hardened consciousness, like turning a blind eye to the well-being of kinfolk outside of the community. So that is a grooming. It's not the same as pedophilia, because pedophilia has much less love and support, and otherwise, for the children who are involved. And what we are informed is that many of the children in pedophilia rings, certain types, are killed eventually. Too much of a liability for exposing, even with any inactivity of a pedophile ring afterwards. Um, so, but we're also informed of there being select children who are selected to be trained as spies, and like be utilized for different purposes as adults, particularly women, to be seductresses, and additionally for high elite targets. So it's not all. I mean, and it's a sophisticated way, because it continues to regenerate itself by recruiting people, and then utilizing cloud mail to keep people in the game, and use the information that's gained on people against them, so that they have to stay in it. And in doing that, they have to give contributions. They have to pay. They can still play, but they got to pay. And then they continue to recruit people, continue to scout for children, looking for vulnerable mothers who are increasingly impressionable, and get very giddy when having a new car, or this, that, and the other, and then make their children much further available to the pedophile ring. And that's how it continues itself, intergenerationally. So the older pedophiles get older, and die off or whatever, and then the younger generation emerges, and the game goes on. And so that sounds very eerily similar to just how society works. Um, so, anyways, and there's grooming. The children are groomed in that process. So some of the children are just abused, and there's less of a grooming, but some of the children are utilized, as I said, for high further strategic purposes, and are provided with like specific training. And additionally, so it's a different methodology than in a religious community, generally speaking, but the mechanics are very similar. All point being is that it involves eventually corruption, and in that corruption, there's the possession of demons. And so the children who experience this from early ages, I myself experienced this, and the sexual corruption, and additionally at a young age. And from that, wrestle with demons from an early age. Now, many children revert to, if having some type of semblance of escape from the actual predatory or the abuse of the ring itself directly, still, well, in those situations, the brethren and sisters often look for escape in other things, whether it's sexual promiscuity and just becoming a prostitute or a gigolo or whatever else, looking for drugs as an escape, or becoming a pimp, or starting one's own ring, or otherwise. Sometimes kinfolk can kind of settle down, and maybe get like a mainstream job or whatever, but still, in each of these situations, kinfolk, the children, child survivors, are wrestling with demons and angels, and so it's a matter of being mindful of that, and then a matter of providing some tools, some equipment, some guidance, and some inspiration, encouragement, support in that wrestling, because we do have that propensity, we do have that support and that backup to defeat the demons, to wrestle with angels and prevail, and it's an ongoing thing. And we even when I talk about wrestling with demons and angels, I perceive that I'm other than overpowered by a demon, or any demons, or a collective of demons at this moment. But so if I wanted to reduce this to like mathematics and percentages or whatever, but if we consider that to be a favorable thing, not to be overpowered, not for it to be over 50% influence and control. And then if we get to like high functioning spirituality in terms of like being 90%, and we're only 10% of our sentience or whatever is unduly influenced or distracted or whatever, by like a spiritual realm in a negative way, demonic kind of influence. So we're not going to reduce it to mathematics because again, that would be conjecture significantly, and I have yet to see like some old school writings about that type of thing. But it's helpful to kind of put it in a framework of tangibility and spectrum. So again, the interest and the guidance is to provide the information and provide methodologies for and the tools and support for kinfolk, child survivors, but all kinfolk who are wrestling with demons and angels, to do so in a proficient manner. And to speak on that whilst I think about it, I mean, some of that is, again, praying, meditating, studying, reading. First, if one is not accustomed to studying scriptures, at first study portions of any scripture, whatever one's familiar with, whatever one's comfortable with. Study portions that are affirmational, that speak a benevolent word. So some examples of that are in the Gospels, the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew chapter 5 through 7. That's a place to begin, to get some strength, to get some fortitude, to get some foundation. Positive word, truth being revealed, non-judgmentalism, non-condemnation, regardless of what you know about Christianity, what you've seen, and additionally, we know. But if you look at just Matthew 5 through 7, for those who have the inclination, just for those who have the inclination, if that's what the people's comfort zone of, Matthew 5 through 7, non-condemning, just revelation of truth, affirmation of the Spirit within us at this very moment, Matthew 5 through 7. In the Buddhist context, I think it's like chapter 13 or 14, but it's the chapter on happiness. That's what I would recommend. To be honest, I would just begin with the beginning, the chapter 1 of the Dhammapada. That is a very powerful affirmation that everything that we experience comes from what we ourselves are thinking. Now that's not easy to fathom when we're in the depths of it, but it's actually exactly empowering. And again, it's telling things that we already know. We already have the solutions. We already have the answers. We already know the answers. Interesting that. We got a brethren circling the parking lot, looking like they're about to go out, but then they don't. And there is a police cruiser with the lights on, parked on the side street. Don't know if the vehicle is responding to that or otherwise. All right. So there's all different types of activity going on. And also I'm mindful because sometimes there's a response to how long I've been doing this, and it's like, yo, all right, wrap it up. That's enough. Continue on, because like it's a cipher, and we recognize the influence within the cipher. So we're not trying to. It's not a flex or anything. We're simply responding to our call. So, we're talking about influence. I did eat yesterday. I have yet to eat today. I do have rice on the stove. Oh, there's the Brethren. Brethren bookstore, bookshop Brethren. All right. Hidi, hadi, hodi, hodi, hadi, hadi. Alrighty. So we're talking about solutions. So I was talking about Buddha. For those who have that inclination, the Dhammapada. The light one is the whole of the Dhammapada is comparatively light. Much of it, I should say, much of it. The chapter on happiness is an affirmational one. The first chapter, it's not as flowery per se, but it's actually very affirmational. It's very empowering. How about that? It's very affirmational of what you already know. In Torah, to be honest, for what I would think about in Torah is two things. One, I think about Kiddushim, Parsha Kiddushim, which is, I want to say Vayikra. So it's in Leviticus. Is that right? Leviticus? Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. Okay, so I think it's Leviticus, Vaikra. Um, to be honest, the specific citation it would be difficult if you just look up Kiddushin. It's an entire portion, but basically it just talks about being holy, and it might seem a little bit like doctrinal about like, oh, this is laws and everything. But if you feel like, pay attention and to the fairness and just like the balance and the harmony, and that's what we're talking about. Um, Otherwise, what I would recommend is actually the beginning, because the beginning shares the nature of the garden, and it's very dense, but it's very natural. And without going too much, because I know it's charged with the whole original sin thing, but letting go of the original sin, and just looking at the garden, like what's that garden like, and feel that. And it's like the first 2 chapters thereabouts, depending on how much further you want to go to. But that's the basic gist. It's just like the nature. And then from that, what I would look at is in terms of just affirmational and like feeling better, and just like healing. I would look at passages that talk about the rain, and the garden experience just throughout the Torah, amidst everything that's happening, looking at the relationship between the children of Israel and Elohim, and how the garden, the springs of water, and additionally, the plentifulness, the crops in its season, and additionally, getting that feeling of connection with nature, that relationship with nature again. That's what I recommend. And there are a lot of different passages that's begun. Like again, I'm not my skill set in terms of pinpoint citation of passages. That's not my forte. My forte is like the gist, like knowing what's taught and the positive. So that's that within Torah. Hindu. To be honest, I would look at Upanishads. The Upanishads are somewhat less accessible than the Bhagavad Gita is. To be honest, Bhagavad Gita, further people know, and the language is further accessible, because once one reads the Bhagavad Gita and has a basic familiarity with the concepts and the teachings within the Bhagavad Gita, the Upanishads is awesome. And I would recommend highly the Upanishads beyond the Bhagavad Gita. But to begin the Upanishads directly, I think it would be a little bit challenging, because it builds from an innate knowledge about concepts and teachings that are pretty much like explained comparatively simply and well within the Bhagavad Gita. So along those lines, for the Bhagavad Gita, what I would recommend is chapter 2, which talks about affirmation of the Spirit of God existing within all of us. Just plain and simple, like God speaking to you, the God within me speaking to the God within you. I'll phrase that differently, because the God can sound somewhat like the deityhood, or deity, multi-deity type thing. But the Spirit of God, the presence of God within me, speaks to the presence of God within you. Chapter 2, Bhagavad Gita. In addition to that, I would recommend also as a beginning, like affirmation, not even just beginning, but continue. Like even if you read it before, if you just need something to pick you up, feel healing, feel light. And additionally, what I would recommend is chapter 6, because chapter 6, it's long and not necessarily all of it, but chapter 6 talks about meditation, the plain and simple mechanics of meditating. Find a quiet space, find a quiet place, spot, sit down, cross leg, sit erect. Nice posture, head erect in a straight line, and sit quietly and meditate and quiet the mind like the flame of a candle in a quiet room. So seeing that and seeing that was written over 2,000 years ago, that for over 2,000 years people have been studying and practicing this. That's part of the power that exists within these words and within these teachings, within this guidance, within this practice, within this life. So that's Bhagavad Gita. So for those who want to go into the Upanishads, there's a lot in the Upanishads that I would recommend. One is the beginning, actually, to be honest, and I'm specifically referring to the Chandogya Upanishad. That's my most familiarity, the one that I'm most familiar with, and the opening just talks about plants. Now, the Ashvata tree is talked about within the Bhagavad Gita, and it's further referenced within the Chandogya Upanishad. And it's very beautiful. That concept of an upside down tree, the roots from heaven and the branches continuing onto earth. And so we understand, we recognize immediately, generally speaking, the experience of a tree. We know that the metaphysics of that. But then to think of a tree upside down. But wait, it's not a tree that draws from the minerals of the earth and everything. It draws from the heavenly, and then it extends into the earth and shares the fruits in this earthly realm from the heaven. Wow. You don't see it, but it exists. We start to better see ourselves. Wait a minute, we are plants. What up? That's another step though. The beginning of the Chandogya Upanishad shares some of that, and the nature of relationship. Oh, I think it's chapter 5, the beginning of book 5 actually, not chapters, book. The first kanda in book 5, Cinco, talks about the senses, and experiencing acknowledging the experience of the sensory, and I'm just going to speak out because my point, I wasn't even thinking about getting into all these topics, but it seems beneficial to share this pragmatic advice. So that's the Chandogya Upanishad. Tao Te Ching. I think I have to think about what chapters these are, but there's one that talks about, there are a few chapters that emphasize water, shui, the nature of water, being humble, seeking the lowest place. That's so soothing and affirmational and healing. Because one can think about, well, are they just telling me to be humble and they want me to be humble before them? Does that just mean being docile and servile? Maybe in some certain ways, yes. But even further, there's a further truth, because it's speaking about the universal experience. So that's meaning towards themselves, to the authorship selves, and to all peoples. So that's part of the universal truth. That's one I would recommend, but the whole of the Tao Te Ching, to be honest, is much further accessible than many of the other scriptures as when beginning to read, as from an outside kind of experience and perspective. Beginning at the very beginning, it's not it doesn't talk about nature per se too much in the first chapter, but it just begins with like an honest contextualization of the entirety of the rest of the teachings, and much of the rest of it. It does get into explicitly political stuff, and that might not be the most easy to read when people are looking for a pick-me-up type of thing. Anything specific, it would be difficult for the chapters. But like I said, water, any of the ones that deal with nature. There's ones that talk about heaven and earth. Those are some additional ones that I would talk about. To be honest, some of the ones that talk about heaven and earth can be like somewhat heavy, and so it's not necessarily the ones to focus on when one just needs a positive, some positive vibe, benevolent news type situation. Maybe skimming the chapter, because at the moment, like I said, I'm not the pinpoint citation type dude. So to say the thing is, the Tao Te Ching is 81 paragraphs. Each chapter is just one paragraph. So, like when I say Matthew 5 through 9. That's like 4 or 5 pages of maybe like 20 paragraphs in total. So it's not that difficult for me to like recognize that and say that. With the Tao Te Ching, like I said, you could read the whole of the Tao Te Ching, and it probably would take just as long as reading Matthew 5 through 7. So that's why I say, and if some of what is shared in the Tao Te Ching, in terms of an immediate pick-me-up, it might seem a little bit tense or whatever. Like I said, skimming over it and just like looking wherever it says nature or water or the mountains or heavens, and just saying, oh, what's that one looking about? And just because it does deal a lot with nature. Now sometimes, as brethren and reason with me, is that it's all politics and like all the metaphors of nature, they're parables about politics and earthly realms and stuff like that. Yes, but at the same time, it's also simply just about nature too. And there's a healing quality within it, because it's the nature within ourselves resonating with the nature outside of ourselves. And so that's what the Tao Te Ching is speaking to significantly. And so it's just a matter of looking at words that pop out of interest, and just saying, oh, water, what's that talking about? Oh, trees in the wind. Oh, what's that talking about? The sunshine, what's that talking about? And just like, and then you can mark those passages yourself, about what hits and what don't. So that's Dao Te Ching. Now, Lun Yu, the Analects of the Confucius, that tends to be further political. There are some brief passages that do talk about nature. One that is, again, pinpoint. I have to look, sometimes I have to look these up and be like, okay, I have to remember generally where this is. But sometimes that takes me paging, thumbing through some of the pages sometimes. But this one is like there are some specific verses, and again, the way the Lun Yu is structured is that the one chapter contains maybe about 30 to 50 or some odd verses. Each verse is comparatively standalone. So even further so than within the Quran. So um, each chapter has a general theme, and it might be a conversation. And so the verses might have some of the verses might have some connection, but oftentimes it's just an aphorism after an aphorism. And so within that, some of the aphorisms are natural, talk about nature, and there's one that talks about wind, that is soothing, that's healing. So there are a few of those, and Confucius is a very congenial and altruistic teacher, but also rather serious and rather like disciplined and strict. So it's not necessarily the ones to get like the pick me up in like what's it called, that the pep talk kind of thing. That just hit me now after all these years. Pep Guardiola. What up? All right. Anyway, all right. So that's that. Now, Minta has much further material, goes much further in depth about the topics that are shared within Dao De Ching and Lin Yu. And there are some extended parables that go on further explaining, like the one concerning the wind. And also, much like Confucius, Kongzi, Mengzi tends to be rather, he's advising leaders, he's advising kings and governors, and so that tends to be the prominence of the material, the discourse and the reasoning in those texts. But again, still, he also includes nature, and he uses parables. And so there's ones about the mountain. There's ones about grass. They're always teaching an ethic. They're always teaching like some ethical behavior. And Meng Tzu tends to be further explicit about that behavior than Lao Tzu is in the Tao Te Ching. Yet again, when there is that necessity of having further substance, of like reading a further, rather than just reading a brief paragraph as a chapter in the Tao Te Ching, you want to read like a few paragraphs that goes further into the details of that parable. Then Meng Tzu provides that in a number of different parts of the classic of Meng Tzu. All right. I'm not trying to be like all staring and everything, but there's a sparrow that arrives here, and I don't know if it's the sparrow that's popping off at the beak at the moment, but the sparrow was shaking, just shaking and shaking and shaking, and now the sparrow is partaking of some rice and seems to be calm a little bit, but there's and I've seen, well, I won't go into all that at the moment. I am sweating though, and I just started doing that. We're just past midday, so now we're dealing at the warmth of the day at the moment in this closed environment without AC or fan. So that's Meng Tzu. A little bit further detail, substance in terms of some of the parables, the natural parables of nature that are shared within the Tao Te Ching and the Lun Yu. All right. Well, now, how are we gonna conclude all this? Who else we got? Oh, all right. Ha 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 ha. We got the Quran. I'm trying to think of anything else before the Quran, because I'll conclude with this and inform you today from dear kinfolk of it being Ashura. Now that escapes me. It's on my calendar, but I didn't do my prayers and meditation yesterday. Haha, how about that? And so that escapes my attention from yesterday, but then we are duly informed and duly noting of that actuality. I already shared something from Torah Kirushim, as well as the beginning Bereshit, the first chapter, the first few chapters in Genesis, the garden experience particularly. I've talked about the Upanishads and the Bhagavad Gita. First book in the Upanishads, Chandogya Upanishad, and then the fifth book, both the beginnings of those. I think it's the fifth book, talking about the senses. And then in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, talking about the spirit, the presence of God. And then chapter 6, talking about meditation, samadhi. Within the Tao Te Ching, I talk about chapter 1, the beginning, and even just skimming through and looking for the chapters or the passages that share some word of nature. I'm seeing one pharaoh and sparrow. How about that? I'm seeing one sparrow feed another one, like it's the child, and they both look like adults. Interesting. It's not the first time I've seen that. And then I think, is this the AI algorithm sending sparrow bots to try to send some psychological message of my undue dependence upon parentage? Such psychological Uber Freud. But that was the first thing the brethren said in his words to me yesterday. So it's obvious that that's part of the intentionality in the message from outside. So continuing on. Kong Tzu, Ming Tzu, Lao Tzu. I mentioned for Tao Te Ching, the first chapter, looking at words that involve nature. There's specific chapters that I would recommend, but it would be difficult for me to number them at this moment. So, again, looking at the words of heaven, trees, the sunshine, and mountains, rivers, the water, and further. There are two particular chapters that talk about the water. One towards the end, and another one towards the beginning. So there's that. Then within Buddhism, as I mentioned, the Dhammapada is just a lot of affirmations. The chapter on happiness, chapter 13 or 14, and then the first chapter that talks about mindfulness. There are a number of chapters. There's a chapter that talks about fragrance, or it's called the flowers, I think is what it is. So, and that's probably like 7 or 8, chapter 7 or 8. There are only 26 chapters in the Dhammapada. But those are some of the ones that are further accessible, further just like flowery and affirmational, and like just like that pick me up type of message. So then within Christianity, in Buddhism, again, still the Digha Nikaya, which is the long discourses. What I would recommend there, to be honest, the Digha Nikaya tends to be heavy. If anything, what I would recommend, maybe in chapter 3, towards the end of chapter 3, what I would look at as actually, I think this is beneficial to look at as an affirmation. I would look at the jhanas, the description of the jhanas. So the jhanas are the 4 states of happiness. And it's a successive experience of progression, and it's established from behavioral discipline of quietness, humbleness, and additionally from that experiencing a quietness of mind and peacefulness of mind, and then even that from there getting even further into the state of like bliss, a blissfulness, not just like pleasure, but just happiness, and that happiness involving harmony and peacefulness and understanding and patience and all that. So there's the way the Buddha describes it, and I think it's in the third book. And it's in many of the books because it's a standard teaching. So it's in the first volume of the Digha Nikaya. It's repeated in a number of the different suttas. So I think particularly it's first told in the third. Actually I think it's first told in the second sutta. When the Buddha is talking about the benefits of the life of a recluse. I think that's when it's first taught, actually, or when it's first articulated within the Digha Nikaya. So that's the second chapter. I want to know, is it the Sonadanda Sutta? Anyways, it's the second sutta, and again, it's actually a very extended parable. And it's an extended passage, but it's nature. So the Buddha just describes like this experience of happiness and describes it in terms of nature, in terms of experiencing nature. Basically, a person taking a bath and being immersed like a lotus with the water, and just the same way the person is like suffused with water or a lotus in the water, and additionally, is the same way the person is suffused with the happiness and peacefulness and tranquility. And it's a succeeding, it's a progressing, it's a very skillful parable, to be honest. It's very impressive, and not to compete or anything with what is shared by Jesus in the Gospels, but it's like it takes those parables like to another level. And so I'm not trying to hate, not trying to compete. I'm just we can reason about that, but to reason about that, we have to be knowledgeable, and it requires reading both. So. Meanwhile, that's just from reading both and studying both for over 20 years. That's what we observe. It's a beautiful sequence, and even before that, what leads up to that and what leads after that is also positive affirmation and a lot of nature parables as well. So again, second sutta within the Digha Nikaya of Buddhism. Then we're going to go back to the Gospels of Christianity, as I mentioned. This is the desk that's falling apart that I'm sitting. This is my childhood desk. Where it's like wood chips at this point that have been dug out and everything. So every time my hand gets sweaty or whatever, and then I put my hand on the desk, I had a cover over it, but now it's been deteriorated. So now I got to recover it again. But this is the desk from like 40 years ago that I had as a lad when I was a young boy. Tough to let things go, is it? Gospels. So like I said, Matthew chapter 5 through 7, Sermon on the Mount. That would be the go-to thing. That's a lot of material right there. At the very beginning, it's very positive. And if it's just a matter of like beginning there and then like that's enough for right now and then coming back later, maybe just staying on that one for a while and then maybe venturing a little bit further. It does, a little bit later on, it does get a little bit further tense and formidable, but it provides a very strong foundation to deal with that at the very beginning. Just technically Matthew, I think it's chapter 5, verse 2, 3, something like that. But the very beginning of Matthew. The Beatitudes. Blessed are those who are poor in spirit, for theirs is the sovereignty of heaven. That's how it begins. So just like in chapter 2 of the Bhagavad Gita, when Sri Krishna speaks to Arjuna and saying, never has there been a time when you and I or the kings here have never existed, nor will there ever be a time when we will cease to exist. Same thing. Affirmation of the Spirit of God within us. What up? What's going on? What's happening? So that Sermon on the Mount, Gospels, Matthew 5 through 7. The Sermon on the Mount is also included in a number of the other Gospels of Mark and Luke, but to a much further brief and less comprehensive extent in terms of the same amount of material. In addition to that, what I would recommend is, again, parables about nature. To be honest, mindful, if one is like in a sensitive frame of mind and like needing just like to hear a positive word and not trying to hear any kind of negativity or whatever, it's beneficial to be mindful and be careful, because in the Gospels it can go from A to Z and back to A. So if you're like skimming through or whatever, and like one line it might be like talking about sparrows and lilies of the field, and then the next line might be talking about condemning the Pharisees to hell. So again, when somebody's in a sensitive state and just trying to see the positive word, I would hesitate in just recommending somebody just to skim through something or flip through something to find this particular passage, because again, I don't pinpoint site, and maybe that's why people do, because they need to direct people exactly where to go, because they know that too. That's the first I think about that too, to be honest. But like I said, Matthew 5 through 7, and then when somebody has that inclination, some of the parables, I'm trying to think, any parable specifically, lilies of the field, even the fields about the sower and the seeds, and I think it's either Mark or Luke, that has a very specific parable about the sower of the seeds, which talks about the sower like having seeds in the ground, and the plants grow of themselves without the sower doing anything, and having knowledge about how it's done. So a lot of those parables are addressing the economics of the people at that time, with the vocation, the occupation, what people, the work, that the labor that people are doing at that moment. But at the same time, it's because it's agrarian, because it's agricultural, it's dealing with nature, and particularly for the urbanized, postmodern, factorized, industrialized mindset. Just like hearing about nature is very soothing, much like visiting an agrarian um, location is very healing and soothing. So that's something similar with the parables. Other than that, what else would I share from the Gospels? That's much of it, I think, at the moment, in terms of like positive, like outright, plain and simple, nice news type of situation from the Gospels. Um, there's other than that, there's a lot of like talk about forgiveness and redemption and understanding and patience, but it's in the context of other types of acute suffering or otherwise. So in terms of just like an immediate, simple, positive word, Matthew 5 through 7. Now that all that being said, then we get to the Quran. So in the Quran, plain and easy. I mean, I guess a Muslim might say, well, first look at the first surah, Al-Fatiha. That's the opening. That's the proclamation of faith every day right before prayer, which I should have done about an hour ago. I did offer Fajr today, as well as Isha before this, actually technically after. So, hooray, hooray, alhamdulillah. So, a Muslim, a devout Orthodox Muslim might say Al-Fatiha. That's the first one to go to, regardless of what topic. Just Al-Fatiha. That's the one to go to in terms of affirmation. And additionally, yes, but at the same time, there's also other additional passages within the Quran that for a person who's just, again, needs an immediate positive affirmation, what I would recommend is actually Surah Ar-Rahman, which is the 55th surah within the Quran. And this one, I have to tell the story about it. I've shared it before, but it's, it just speaks to what this is. So I had a conversation with Kinfolk here a number of years ago, and I think Kinfolk were actually kind of testing me to see, let's see if he's actually like how serious is he in his faith or whatever. And it is a very easy, simple question or whatever, basic question, a very kind and generous question. I could see it wasn't a conversational question because the person wasn't ready to give the same kind of information, so it was like further a test kind of question. That's fine, but it's still a very beautiful, genuine, legitimate question, a generous question, which is, what is your favorite surah in the Quran? So my immediate response is, that's very easy for me. It's Surah Al-Rahman, the 55th surah. And so the brethren responds, okay, cool. We said, why is that? And explain why. And then that was pretty. And then I asked back, and the brethren kind of like gave a nondescript response, like a surah I was less familiar with, at least by name. I know the surahs at least by content, generally speaking, but by name, again, that's somewhat of the pinpoint type of thing. I'm still working on it. My Arabic is comparatively modest. So I said, oh, what is the surah specifically talking about? And so but he didn't want to talk about too much about the surah or whatever. So I said, okay, fine. I guess I answered the question. Maybe I passed the test for that moment. The tests are on a daily basis. So, and again, it's a fair question. It's a legit question. It's a legit question for him to ask. It's a very fully legit question for him to ask. And it's a very, not just a legit, it's a very generous question for him to communicate, because during that occasion, I'm visiting a place that's hosted by the kinfolk in the Ummah. So it's very legitimate, and I'm claiming to be a Muslim, and to be a practitioner. And additionally, so it's only fair if I'm not going to the masjid, and additionally, kinfolk ain't seeing me there. So let's call it. Now I've been doing it for years at that point, but still, no, it's okay. Still, brother Muslim, what's your favorite surah? Here it is. Actually, that's a much further legitimate question than what I was asked in the refugee camp of just, are you a Muslim? And that's it. Anyways, all right. So now we got the musicality of the banality. Then checking to see if it's a 50 caliber machine gun. Like, I smile and it sounds like a joke. That's actually not a joke. There's less expectation of it being that, but like that's the reason for me like scoping. Um, so, anyways, continuing on. So I answered the question, Surah Al-Rahman. Now, that's not where the story ends. So then a little bit later, as I'm in the depths of travails and how they compare to this, actually, it's different, but it's significant. But I was preparing to leave the country, and I was actually staying in a hostel. Had just gotten to the airport and gotten accosted by the police days before that. So and then I was in the Potomac area, going to talk with the embassies to facilitate international travel. So as I'm there, I'm at the hostel where I usually stay in my stomping grounds, as I'm preparing to go to the embassies to get some travel credentials to leave the country. And so as I'm dealing with all this stress, COVID is hitting. Cats are sick all over the place. I actually get sick in that process, but later on. But as I arrive at the hospital, there's a brother from Egypt who's there, and he's a quiet, humble brethren amidst a number of people being loud and everything else like that. He's a Muslim, and so we talk about this, and we talk about the Quran, and additionally. And so he's not questioning me. Everybody has their different protocols or whatever else. And so we just had a cordial conversation, whatever. And so one time, as I'm sitting, like one of that first day or whatever, as I'm sitting in the lounge, just like doing whatever I do, he just walks out to me and gives me his phone. And he says, listen to this. So I'm like, okay. I'm about to cry just thinking about it at the moment. So then So then I take his phone and I press play, and it's an audio recording of a recitation in Arabic of Surah Ar-Rahman, and I listen to the whole thing, and it's very comforting at that time. So after I listened to the entire thing, and the brother did it was just went on did it what is because it takes like 15-20 minutes to listen to the whole thing, and so I knew when he shared it, like, yo, I have the sanction, I have the pass to listen to the entirety, so I do. And then afterwards I thank him and I return it to him, and then I ask him, like, why do you give me that surah, I might have, I'm trying to think how I said this, but I might have talked about the conversation like a year or so ago when I talked to the brother before, when he asked me about my favorite surah, like what's the most meaningful one to me. So for the brethren to give it to me like that, again, that's connection. And so I asked him, like, why did he give me that particular surah? He had it queued up and everything. So I said, why did you give me that surah? And he just looks at me matter of factly, and he says, that's the most beautiful surah. And I'm like, that's a thing? Like, it's well known? He's like, yeah, everybody knows that. I was like, oh, okay. Truth. So for kinfolk who are looking for that, that's what I would recommend. Now, that's not all. I mean, there's many passages there are many ayat within the surahs that provide a similar message, provide the same message about the garden and about replenishment, about healing, about life, about green and water. It's rife throughout the Quran, but in terms of just like right there, that would be the go-to joint. Um, we'll talk about the ego thing and the machismo or whatever about crying at the window now, but we'll finish what we're talking about here. Um, so, like I said, there are other ayat throughout the surah that talk about this. Um, some of it goes into further detail in other different aspects of the experience of the garden, but it's all the experience of the garden. Um, and that's what's shared within the different traditions. The parables are speaking about and reminding us of the experience of the garden, and how to get there, how to experience that, what it is. to remember that amidst all the distractions and invitations and otherwise. So that's the Quran, and that concludes this session of recommendations for pep talks from the scriptures when needing some nice news, and that's that. Now, before I talk about the crybaby stuff and everything else, what I will say also concerning the intentions about going to the church, as I mentioned before, the Rosary, Holy Rosary Church. This is not a gangster thing. We're not trying to prove anything. We do have to respond when confrontations are put at our front door, just like with that this afternoon. Brethren came up again, and brethren it could be a feign kind of like trying to make reconciliation, of like, oh yeah, he knows about it, and I want to make amends and everything else like that, and a halfway of way, but at the same time it's halfway the other way too, and at some point, like that half-hearted kind of like reconciliation thing can turn into a double up assault and battery type thing. So that's why we have to be mindful, and we don't have as much luxury in entertaining the doubtedness. So that's part of the challenge on the different sides. So when the brethren just walks up again this afternoon to the doorstep, we address it because it's appropriate. So now we're not. It's not. There's no vendettas. We're not. I gotta get paper towel and fix myself. So I've been sweating this whole time. Ain't no napkin to wipe my brow. So now we got to get this. So there's no vendettas. We're not here to prove nothing. It's not a territory. Yes, come to the hood where I live, and cause static or whatever else. Yes, we do have an owner's address. It's not. We don't own this territory. It's Wyandotte land. But at the same time, this is where we live, and so we are recognizing that when you come to where we live, that is an increasing offense. That's an assault on us. If we're just in your hood and you're coming at us, that's a different thing. When you come to us, we have to deal with that. Now that being said, and amidst these conditions, we continue to go through your hood because you don't own it, and you know you don't own it, and it's part of the streets and the public. So that's the quickest way to get to where we're going. And if you had talked to us with respect and said we would prefer you not to be here and not to walk along this way, we can negotiate about that. It's not a big deal. But when we're doing this little tiddlywink thing, we continue doing this. And so we continue to handle our business. And our business is not with Little Italy. We're not trying to do nothing with Little Italy. It's inconsequential. It's a thorough way to get to where we're going. And that's not meant as disrespect. That's the facts. We're not there to socialize. We're not there for beef or anything. But when Little Italy does ignorant, disrespectful things to our ancestors, we have to address that. And in addressing that, we're not disrespectful. We're honorable in how we address it. Brother Bookstore is rather active and pronounced about doing something today. He's changed up his look and doing something. Can y'all communicate? Can y'all just talk like plainly and simply? I mean, it's obvious like you're trying to say something and do something, and it's not malice. It doesn't feel like malice, but it just looks so much confusion and drunkenness. Brother's been like wandering this parking lot this whole afternoon, looking like he doesn't know what to do, and that could be a distraction for something else or other. So, like, what do y'all want? What are y'all trying to do? Who are you trying to be? And that's not negative. That's not whatever. Like, seriously, y'all, what's going on with y'all? All right. Um, so that's the intention, ongoing intention. Done the shuttle, but we recognize the shuttle is part of the problem too. So that's not a viable avoidance of the confrontation. So no, we just have to walk through, and come what may, we don't come through ignorant and disrespectful whatever. We come where our purpose is to walk to the place that we're going to. We say hi and we acknowledge deuces. You don't own it, and so we do deuces because that's what we're about. We're not. We continue doing that. We continue doing that. So you might, how you can respond and do whatever you like recording. And at this point now, we're doing it with the intention of recording ourselves. And whatever happens to the devices, and additionally, that's on everybody. But that's where we're at this point, because you're coming to our hood, you're coming to our dwelling spot, and that's crossing the line. You cross the line. You're crossing the line, and you know that. So we're not there, and our purpose for being there is not to be antagonistic. It's not to kick up dust. It's not to disrespect. It's not to piss on your walls or anything else like that. We're walking through, and we're recording it because that's where things are at this point. Now there is the intention of addressing the Holy Rosary, and that's it. There's no business with the cigar shop at this point. It's beyond the cigar shop. No talking. The other brethren, they can talk if they want, but there's nothing to say because brethren had opportunity to talk already. I won't name names because that's not the point. But like we're not the smiley face. Where you been at? What's going on? I miss you, man. What? No. We can't say shut the fuck. We're not going to say shut the fuck to that because we're not trying to be antagonistic and we're not going to give a reason for provocation. But that's what the situation is with that whole smiley, pretend, nicey thing. No, be real, be a man, and be direct. We are walking through our businesses with Holy Rosary at this point, not the children. We're dealing with Holy Rosary, and at this point, we don't even have to say anything to the Holy Rosary. We've already posited the question. The question is to Holy Rosary, the Catholic Diocese, and the Catholic Church. When this building leaves the hand of the Catholic Church, into whose hands do you want this building to go? That's it. That question has been restated. There's not a need to say it again at all. There is the intention for me to go to Holy Rosary to see what the reception is, and to offer reasoning otherwise. That it can include positing the question directly in person. Doesn't necessarily have to be that. We don't have that agenda along those lines because it's already been articulated. It's already on record. It's already received. So, mission accomplished already. Now we just continue on with our business. And our business happens to take kinfolk through Little Italy. And we are mindful of the increased hostilities, and so we prepare accordingly. There is the propensity. We have to look at that. There's some additional things that I'm just not going to speak of at the moment. Just like detail type stuff, but I'm going to leave it at that. Now, initially, as I already said, we're working on cultivating my personal discipline of only going on the internet on Mondays. Today is Wednesday. And so what happened at the Little Italy was on Monday. What happened here was yesterday, Tuesday. There's the consideration, I have yet to be on the internet since Monday. And there's a consideration of uploading immediately the video from yesterday on the internet yesterday. But no, that's detracting from our intended discipline concerning the internet, and that's a further priority. It's part of, it's all connected, but there's a greater priority for this cultivation of discipline because we recognize the distraction and the effect and influence on concentration that uh, the internet causes. So we're continuing with that protocol of Mondays. Now that may involve me going to the same or another Wi-Fi spot that involves my travel through Little Italy again on Monday. Maybe depends on what the weather is, particularly. It may be a matter of me being here. So a point is like our priority is not get back or whatever at Little Italy or any other kinfolk. Where it's not get back at all. And it's not proving, oh no, you came to us, we're gonna come to you. Da, da. That's not. We're not about that either. It's tiddlywinks. We have business on the other side. We're not going to avoid the most direct route of getting there. We're if there was some negotiation and diplomacy of just saying, oh, it's better just to keep a distance or whatever else, and we'll keep a distance from you, and we'll stop doing the disrespect, and let's keep it at that. We haven't had that conversation, and so we don't have that obligation of abiding by those protocols. So we're not going to be initiating in that respect either, because there's increasing affronts that need to be addressed and redressed and reconciled. So that's where things are at this point. And that's where it is now. In terms of the crybaby, and snotty up and everything else. Oh yeah, he's such a man. Look at him crying over some emotional bullshit. First, I'll say what I was crying about. Am I crying because I'm in pain and sorry for myself or otherwise? Everything is everything. So yes. How much? Maybe about that much. What I cry about, particularly in this instance, is just the grace of God, and seeing the beauty that God shares in this world. Like when I'm kicked out of the refugee camp, literally living in the field outside of the refugee camp, outside the gates, and other refugees who are in the same type of plight, fleeing for their lives in another country, stop and talk with me and give me bread, like bread that they don't have for themselves, and blankets, and additionally, and say, yo, we'll get you back in, da 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 da. I'm humbled by the grace of the Most High. That's what brings me to tears, because it's awesome. Now the pain is pain, we deal with that, but then we also see the beauty and the grace, and we give thanks for that. So that's what that is. Now, is it just masking the tough facade, masking the pain, and then excuse? You can deal with your psychological whatever's yourself. Here's one thing for consideration, though, is that feeling hides the spiritual. So when we talk about this experience of feeling, I feel this, I feel that, and all the emotions, and additionally, even when we literally talk about the sensory feelings, feeling hides the spiritual. Feeling hides the heavenly. What is being manifested? What is being processed? What is being shared? What is being grown through the perceived feelings? I feel that this is da 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 da. That's perception. That's cognition. That's intellectualization of the experience of relationship with other beings, with other life, with other phenomena. And all of those phenomena, beings and life, are extensions, branches of the spiritual and the heavenly. So when we talk about feelings or whatever, it's one of the ways of tangibly understanding these experiences, but at the same time it masks it, particularly when we conclude it as just emotions or otherwise, or being emotional. When we recognize the source of the feelings, when we recognize the source of the feelings, we better see the spiritual, the heavenly. and also the purpose, the reason, the relationship, the solution, the path, the discipline, the sharing, the relationship, marriage, procreation, and further. Let me tell it. So, that's what we got at this moment. Um, and now let's have some food. How about that? And now we eat. Now we feast. Oh, it's rice. We might have some oil with this now. Oh, I feel so healthy. I'll show this as a clothing joint. I watch a video from Brethren who's of Asian ancestry in the mountains, and the title of it, the clickbait for it is "Why I'm a he describes himself as a neurosurgeon who's unemployed and in the mountains, and why that is. Basically, that's what the video is. And it's about like 45 minutes or whatever, and it's a long video. Let me tell it at 2 hours and 15. And one of the things that makes it seem long for 45 minutes is that he talks kind of slow. He's very gentle in how he talks. He's about 38, 39 thereabouts, pushing 40. Middle age, talking about going through a middle age crisis, so to speak. But he describes that he's not going through a middle age crisis. Is that he went through a middle age crisis when he started his career, 10 years before that, and now he's just dealing with like making a decision that's healthier for him at this point, 10 years later. So basically, he talks about being a neurosurgeon and what that involves. He talks about his initial dreams. And about like what he wanted to do as a neurosurgeon, and recognized eventually early on in his career that it wasn't going to happen, just because not about anything about himself, but just like the actuality of what the endeavor is just not very implausible. And so the fallback thing was for him to focus on spinal surgery, because spine and brain are similar, and so many neurosurgeons also primarily offer spine surgery, back spine surgery. So that's what he does for 10 years after medical school residency and otherwise. And then, but at the same time, like what he remembers learning, or prominent lesson that he learns in medical school, not necessarily the same thing as the Patch Adams scene, but what is taught to him is, as he's taking the Hippocratic Oath, and he affirms that, from my information, not everybody takes that, at least as doctor. He says he takes that as a medical student when he begins studying, so that's interesting. That's beneficial to know. And another demon that doctors have to wrestle with when violating that. So, and that's not shade. I'm just communicating that. So just put the parts together. But he takes the Hippocratic Oath, and then one of the things that's taught to him is that his job is to lessen the suffering of others. That's what his job is, and that's one of the old school teachers of his medical school. And he's very respectful. He's very reverent when talking about all his teachers and all his co-workers and colleagues and employers and everything else like that. So he's very positive, affirmational, in a very Asian kind of cultural way of just being respectful and deference. And it's sometimes very difficult to like maintain in a Western culture type of situation and have some semblance of credibility amidst the heightened scrutiny and everything else like that. But so very much appreciated. Very gentle, very slow in his talking. So again, for the speedy data, it might require some patience, but at the same time, he's substantive. He tends to be to progress his line of articulation, meaning like less repetition, less circulating. Like he tends to be on track, as a neurosurgeon might be considered to do. So anyways, and he talks about like once he started like getting into his career, and just he recognized that his dream thing was actually very implausible, and then also as he started getting into the work, he recognized that he was basically providing often a temporary solution to the symptoms of what people are experiencing, meaning that people would be leading these comparatively sedentary lives and then experiencing the effects of that, and then he could do a surgery for some people, and that would relieve some of the pain, and additionally, sometimes for a long time, sometimes for a very short time, but it was generally addressing just the symptoms. And he gives the metaphor of a house having a leaky roof, And in the leaky roof, um, the water coming into a room and damaging the walls and ceilings and everything of the room. And so he described his job as being uh, like the carpenter or the contractor who comes in and fixes up the room. So he knows how to do the surgery, and he describes some of the details of the surgery and everything. Um, and so he can fix the room up and tear down the walls and replaster and repaint and everything else like that. And so the room can look spanking new and whatever. However, it didn't fix the roof. It didn't fix the leak, and so eventually, again, it needs to be repaired. And so he was saying he was describing that as his spine surgery, and he also applies that to a lot of the other different types of procedures and methodologies for medicine and healing in the medical industry. And he was very respectful for that, and he was emphasizing like he's not trying to throw anybody under the bus or whatever, but he just explained like this is facts. And it bothered him. Like he wants to help suffering, and so he was making money. He's making bank. He's employed. He's doing his job. He's doing it nice. He's being comfortable. He's got respect, and he's got standing in society. And he has a wife, and his wife is very caring, and he's very emphatic about his wife being amazing and supportive of him. So then he talks about being dissatisfied, and spent like 9 years, 10 years as a surgeon, neurosurgeon, and recognizing like he can't be doing this because what he learned, he was studying in the process. So he was learning about like what's going on and whatever. And so what he recognized is that one, the hospitals and by association the doctors, the model, the paradigm of how it works, the medical system in the United States particularly, but in other places, is not helpful, because he says that the hospitals are in a business. It's not a charitable place. It's a place to make money, and it just offers medical services. That's my words rather than his words per se, but it's basically what he was saying. And he was saying that because of that, the hospitals don't actually have a vested interest in healing people per se outright. The hospitals have an interest in people purchasing the medical services. So that was something that was problematic, because that reduces itself to just surgeries and popping pills, the pharmaceuticals. So he as a neurosurgeon, he was observing his patients and like what was going on. And so when he would schedule surgeries with some of his patients, and it would be months away for the surgery, there would be a few occasions when his patients would call him back just a few weeks before the surgery and tell him that they didn't have the symptoms, like their back was fine, they are healed, and should they still go on with the surgery? And in many cases, they didn't continue with the surgery. And so he's like, well, what are these people doing? That the people are having like a recovery and feeling, and being, not just feeling, but being healthy, in terms of what was causing concerns or problems before. And so this would happen numerous occasions. He would still go on doing his surgery with other patients, but then he would, with those that he would find like would cancel the surgery and be fine and healed themselves, he would find out, what's going on. And so he identified certain characteristics amongst the people who were experiencing that healing. And so he said those characteristics are doing meditation. We can include prayer with that. He didn't utilize the prayer language, but we can include that within that. But meditation, sitting quietly, calmly, meditating. He mentioned going outside, getting fresh air, getting some exercise. He mentioned specifically sweating, and being outdoors with the fresh air and the natural elements. He talks about having social life, relationship with people, of loved ones who give and take in terms of conversation and support. He talks about, one of the first things he talks about is a plant-based diet, eating vegetables and fruits, and he mentions he himself is not a vegan, and this is not a vegan spiel or whatever. He says occasionally he likes his meat and fish and otherwise. So, but he recognized, just as a doctor, medical practitioner, that those who were experiencing this healing on their own were eating very little salt, being very, very modest in terms of the salt intake, and then leading a basically plant-based diet. They might have had food here and there otherwise, but eating a lot of whole grains and plants, and fruits and vegetables, particularly vegetables and greens. I'm putting greens in there just because I know. So that's what he described, and then the exercise, and there might have been another element that I have yet to mention in it, but he basically said that was the basic formula, and that he found that across the board through for a number of years, and that was putting him in a quandary because he's like, yo, when he knows that, and his job is to like alleviate suffering, and he knows that this is what people are doing to like not experience these symptoms again of back pain or otherwise, like that's what he should be doing. That's what he should be recommending and advocating additionally, and not just like doing the surgery. So he would do the surgeries again with those who still need it, because some people don't have that lifestyle or that discipline or whatever, and don't have the other that type of solution. But he still knew like that couldn't be his livelihood or whatever else, and that was very difficult for him because he's gleaning from how he describes it. He's lived a life that's very comfortable, and he's with his wife. He says that they don't have children, but um, uh, which makes a decision of quitting his job easier at that moment. But there was no other prospect, and still no other prospect, at least at the time of the recording, because he just recorded. Well, I don't know when this was recorded actually, but in the framework of when his narrative is, he had quit his job about 9 months before recording that. So. Um, he also talks about healing, and he says that the body heals itself, and when people take care of the body, and he says how much food is a significant factor in well-being, and within the food, two big factors are one, reduced salt, and the other, plants. And he says how significant the influences of that adjusted behavior are for a person's well-being, and that it's not just a spine that is healed in that process, but in the entirety of a person's body is healed when a person feeds the body healthily, and does the other things about exercise and socializing and meditation, quiet space, and additionally. Um, so that's what he finds, and that's what he does. He eventually quits his job. Um, and he shares the message with other kinfolk about um, the formula for health. And there's one other thing um, to share in this respect. We're getting some of the reverberations of the environment at the moment, which is causing some of the devotion of, or the investment of concentration as I work to think about this concluding joint, um, and it's part of the factors of all the things that are going on around. I'll give voice to this part too. So this comes into it because most likely, the presumption is that the kinfolk, it's a drum, it's African drum, it's a person of European ancestry who's playing it, presumably a resident here, a recent resident here. Um, Beautiful brethren, pluses and minuses. Part of the challenge is that in the introduction, the recent introductions of the brethren, he basically communicates about all the shade that everybody else has towards me in the vicinity of what he's heard about. Everybody talks about me, whatever. But that he wants to like protect me, and so or wants to like advocate for me, or whatever, and he identifies with me. So it's that trope of the nice cop bad cop situation. Um, and even when people are genuinely trying to be that, it's not that. It doesn't. It's not even a semblance of that. So when kinfolk play the drum and talk about how much they like the African drum and want to identify it, that's not it either. It's actually contributing to the dissonance and the dust kicking up. And whether kinfolk are genuine in the intentions or actually just doing the malevolent gaslighting, it's comparatively indifferent because the outcome is the same. It's a disruption. It's a different provocation, not just to myself but other kinfolk. So then, when I play the drum, then there's further scrutiny. Otherwise, now we're established and we do things comparatively inconsequential, and it's not trying to hate or trying to tell people to not play the drum. But when kinfolk feign to say that they're doing us a favor or trying to advocate for us, or I think no. Let's be honest about this. Everyone who's a citizen here is working for that process. People are wrestling with that, and we know that, and we don't want to be dismissive of that or discounting that, but be honest about that and recognize where people's allegiances are. Recognizes where how people are getting fed, and how people are acquiescing to those conditions and to those hands. So when people are trying to like be nice and everything, and garner some trust and allyship or whatever, no, understand. No, be honest about it, because you might genuinely want a congenial situation here or there as a vacation, but your full-time allegiance and additionally is elsewhere to the contrary. So now, even if you're trying to be nice, you're just being a different type of saboteur. So it's just, let's be honest about that. If you want to be nice, first give up the citizenship. Um, Let go of the citizenship, and deal with the same type of admonishment and hostilities that you observe others doing to us. That's what it is. So there's no vacation allyship. That's just another methodology of down oppression and affliction. So let's be honest about that. No hate, not hate, no anger, but just less patience about dealing with the pretendedness, the facade, the pretenses, the false pretenses. Let's just be honest about this. So, and we know kinfolk are striving. Kinfolk are struggling and wrestling. We know that, and we're not trying to put undue burdens. Um, but the status quo type stuff ain't the solution, and it ain't genuine, and it just that adds to the burden. That opens further the window for the chains of the demons. And I'm getting a lot into this demon trope, huh? Cats haven't been listening to much else for the past 20 years, generally speaking. So, and it's legit. It's not hyperbole. So, in terms of the healing, um, the mountains. And with that said, watching the butterflies and the tree leaves and the clouds, the grass, the sparrows, the nondescript winged buggers flying by, and all that. We give all things in praise to the Most High Elohim, known by many names and beyond all names. Respect and honor to all our ancestors, prophets, and sages, past and present, known and unknown. Respect and honor to His Majesty Haile Selassie and Her Majesty Waizara Manen. Perfect balance of husband and wife. Respect and honor to all our relatives of creation. Respect and honor to all our parents, all our forebears, all our elders. Respect and support to all our progeny, de los primeros 7 años a los próximos 7 generaciones dorvedor. One heart, one mind, one love supreme, blessed love and peace in Rastafari.